Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another of your spooky sessions with me, your host, Hedda Gold. Now, tonight I'm going to read you a ghost story, and it's called Mama Bones. It's one that you need to think about. It's probably not quite as obvious, but it certainly is one that leaves you thinking. And I do hope that you enjoy the choice I've made. And then we go on to part 2 of Restoration, written by the author Zithero. And this one, next episode, is the action starts to pick up. And it's very exciting. I know I loved it. So I hope you love it too. So without further ado, please sit back and relax while I read your first story to you, and that's called Mama Bones. And I do hope that you enjoy it. Since the beginning of time, we've been told stories of wicked witches, bogeymen, and other fantastical monsters, usually to try and frighten us into good behaviour, or as by means of entertaining ourselves during camping trips, that sort of thing. Few of us continue to believe in these childhood monsters as we grow older, and we're programmed to obey the norms of our society. To some, this means abandoning the notion of the supernatural in favour of logic and reason, the so-called scientific way of thinking. For others, they abandon tales of wicked witches and monsters for more complex belief systems. The childhood fears replaced more by adult fears, such as what happens to your soul, one's duty to a divine force or similar, the so-called religious way of thinking. Yet for a minority of us, neither logic and reason nor scripture is enough to get rid of our childhood obsession with the dark and the mysterious. We still dream of the monsters and witches of old, even if our adult minds constantly remind us that such beliefs are superstitious at best and mad at worst. I would describe myself as one of the minority, forever lost in daydreams, but knowing that I had to exist in a world very much separate from the ghosts and goblins I was told of when I was young. One of my friends, however, was much more superstitious than I was, and he believed the world was haunted. In order to spare my friend ridicule from an often harsh audience, I'm going to refer to him as Stephen, and share with you the story he often told me about Mama Bones, a figure he claimed definitely existed. I jokingly call him mad every time, perhaps because this story always brings back those childhood fears of mine that I try so hard to block out during my everyday life. Anyway, the story, as Stephen used to call it, always began on a Saturday night at around 11 o'clock on a November evening. Stephen said he would walk down a path not too far from his home that led to an old churchyard that had fallen into disrepair many years ago. As instructed by his grandfather, who'd passed away not long before, Stephen told this tale to me. Upon reaching the end of the path, Stephen would slip through a fair-sized gap in the wall surrounding the churchyard and go to a small grave next to a weeping willow tree. As the clock struck 11, Stephen claimed a figure would appear next to the grave, resembling an old woman, sitting cross-legged and covered in dirty rags that concealed her face. The figure would sit quietly until approached, and Stephen said that upon approaching her, he would call her Mama Bones, as his grandfather instructed him to do, and he would ask how she fared. And if she responded that she was well, it was an invitation to speak with her. However, if she didn't answer you, Stephen would then leave the churchyard without speaking another word. Stephen said Mama Bones could answer any question, but one had to be mindful not to stay longer than 1 hour. For when the clock struck midnight, the figure would take off her robes. Stephen had never dared stay longer than to experience this, but he claimed his grandfather had told him a frightening tale of what happened. As a young boy, Stephen's grandfather claimed to have hidden as his friend spoke with Mama Bones, forgetting about the time. And as the clock struck midnight, Mama Bones removed her rags, and Stephen's grandfather covered his eyes as his friend apparently dropped dead from fright. His friend dropped dead from fright. I always chuckled a little at this, though Stephen would give me a look that silenced me. Although the story sounded silly to me, I could tell that Stephen didn't find any humour in it. To him, this was very real, and I am sure his grandfather would have been the same. So what more can be said about Stephen and his story of Mama Bones? Not much, I suppose. A rather basic ghost story told by a friend. That's what I always try to convince myself. So there, my friends, is your short story. And it leaves you with a little something to think about. Right, now, on to your next story, which is Restoration Part 2. Now, where did we leave off last week? Last week, we were left with the fact that there was a large patch of blood on the marble floor, and what was left was the impression of a figure with large wings and a very large sword. That was the impression left. And the last words spoken last week were Chavez saying, "Angels died here." So we're now going to take up from where we left off last week. And this is Restoration, as I say, written by the author Zithero. And I think he's done wonderfully by us in the preceding months. I've been reading his stories to you. I've thoroughly enjoyed them, and I do hope you have too. I hope you enjoyed last week's story, so let's quickly get into this one. And again, I hope you enjoy it. I'm just going to have a quick drink to get ready for this episode. This is episode 2. And here we go. I heard what Chavez said, but I don't think I was letting it sink in. Angels don't die. Angels don't exist. Well, that's my personal opinion, but that's neither here nor there. If angels existed, I'd have seen a damn miracle or two around my house. My mother was a god nut. Super religious, yet nothing saved her from a car accident or stopped my father's cancer. No, there's some rational explanation. I know there is. This imprint on the floor, sure, it could be human. Timothy said this was a massacre over 300 years ago. So some guy died in a pool of his own blood, sword in hand, and the rest pooled in the shape of wings. No, it couldn't be wings. This was kind of like a Rorschach test. You know, someone sees puffy clouds, Chavez sees wings, because there's 2 giant 30-foot statues of angels flanking the centre of the damn room. It's all in his head, that's all. I get a hold of myself. Chavez, Pete, get the scissor lift in here. Help out Bob and Mike and let's get this job over with. Sooner we start, sooner we're done. Chop chop. Pete gets motivated pretty quick, but Chavez is now on one knee, making the cross over his chest and saying God's prayer. I ignore him for now and get to busy myself with the task at hand. The most difficult problem first. The statues on the left needs to be cleaned, and carefully, since it's a work of art. As Bob and I are guiding the scissor lift into the place, I hear Timothy shouting something at Chavez. I rush over, and now I feel like I'm on a normal work site. Hey, don't shout at my guys. What's going on? Chavez has both of his hands up, stepping back from a huge structure of canvas and plywood, making up a barricade to the right side of the entrance. I was just checking for more stains, Fred. Understanding Chavez is a new thing for me, but it's not entirely unwelcome. Timothy seems exasperated. I appreciate your due diligence, but this is unstable. I cannot have anyone pass these barriers. I apologise. I should have made that clear. The main hall is where the cleaning must be done. Only the main hall. Any area that's barricaded is unsafe. I can't be held liable for the safety of your men if they wander past them. I looked to Chavez. You heard the man. Help Bob with the scissor lift and then get to pre-treat the statue. But be careful, okay? Chavez nods and looks to Timothy. What saint is she? Timothy looks at the statue for a moment and gets this kind of faraway look in his eyes. Dinah of Enoch. Chavez gives Timothy thumbs up and says, I'll take good care of Saint Dinah. She will sparkle. He runs off to help Bob with the scissor lift, and a very confused Bob and Chavez make their way over to the statue of Dinah, I guess. Timothy is smiling an odd kind of smile, and I almost break my no questions rule for a moment. I get my hard hat on and start shouting at Bob when I see he's not wearing a harness on the lift. Typical worksite stuff. Got to remind the old-timers they're mortal and make sure the greenhorn of the group doesn't fuck something up. I'm happy to slide back into my routine. And it wouldn't last, of course. About halfway through the day, we're just about getting the bust of this statue clear. And I gotta say, she's looking as good as new when we hear a huge bang. It sounds almost like someone took a large aluminium pipe and smashed it down onto the marble. It echoes over our tools, and even the guys with ear protection are taken back by the sound. I scream and shout to cut the equipment and tell Bob and Chavez to get off the scissor lift. Lord knows if something blew on the damn thing. It's a rental after all. I call Mike over to have a look. Mike slides under the lift as Bob and Chavez unhook their harnesses. Chavez looks to me. It wasn't the lift, boss. Well, what the fuck was it then? Chavez points to behind one of the barricades, and I spot Timothy running towards it. I think I hear him mumble something like, this can't be happening right now. I shout to him, hey, Tim, you need a hand? Timothy shoots me a stern look, and in a pretty practiced officer tone commands us, no one is to go beyond this point. How something may have collapsed. If there's an issue, I'll let you know. You stay there. And disappears behind a piece of plywood and canvas. I look to my guys and tell them to continue to inspect the scissor lift and then get back to work if everything's okay. God only knows what compelled me to walk towards the barricade at that moment. Morbid curiosity? A lapse of sound judgment? Mini stroke? Still not sure to this day, but man, was this at least the third or fourth stupidest thing I did that day. I get just close enough to hear voices. There's a woman on the other side, and Timothy. I'm sorry, I truly am, but I'm afraid they're all gone. I hear Timothy say, hushed, but still enough for me to hear. I know your privilege, your pilgrimage, must have been arduous. The female voice sounds frantic and heartbroken. But they can't be. Surely this cannot be. Who would do such a thing? Who could? Was it an army? It was just 2 people, unfortunately. He sounds almost guilty. They seemed to come in relative peace, but it was soon apparent that at least one of them had other ideas. All fought valiantly, but they couldn't be stopped. The woman's voice is trembling. It was her, wasn't it? The daughter of Lou. The pressure washer kicked in and startled me while drowning them both out, and I realised how close I was to the barricade, trying to listen. I stepped back and made my way quickly to the rest of the group. Keeping an eye on the far barricade Timothy had vanished behind. I don't see Tim emerge until we're just about done for the day, the statue clean. Timothy stops as he sees it, in reverence of some kind, I guess, looking over it silently. I walk over to him. So far so good. We should be able to get some pre-treatment on the flooring. Let it sit overnight and then we'll hit it hard tomorrow. Timothy just nods. Your men do swift work. That's what we do, I said proudly. Pete starts yelling for me from across the room. I excuse myself and hustle over. What's up? I look at Pete's ears and he just points down. There's, for lack of a better word, a gash in the flooring. I need to explain why this floor is unusual, more so than just having blood all over it, and more than the shapes in said blood. You see, this floor, it doesn't have seams. It's a solid chunk of marble. I've seen some expensive walls and floors that are huge slabs, sure. Happens all the time. If you have enough money, they'll tow a mountain to your house. But this was a mansion worth of floor that for the life of me, I could not find one damn seam in. Now the gash, it's almost 10 feet long and at the centre, it looks almost 6 inches deep. Even with a light, while I can see the bottom, it looks pretty dark inside the gash. Pete looks to me. I'm going to ignore how this got here and just ask what we're supposed to do. The surface scratches are easy to buff out, but this isn't going to buff out easy. I call Mike over to have a look. Mike looks it over and runs his hand over the edges of the opening, as well as its sides. It's all stained, of course. Jesus. He stands up and looks it over. That's one clean swipe. There are no cutting marks like you'd get if you were slicing into it with a floor cutter. So, he starts thinking. Can toss in quick set to fill it. Get it most of the way full anyway. Or we could just toss in some filler and polish, but I think we can do better with some resin. Make it look a bit more natural. It's up to the client though. This is going to cost extra. I look it over. A 2-inch wide, 10-foot long and 6-inch deep slash in the marble. Clearly wasn't the order. I look to see Timothy is already approaching us. Ah, just the man I need to see, I say. Timothy looks down and shakes his head. She did some serious damage. Don't ask, just don't. I keep saying that in my head. We can fill it and get it level, may even make it look pretty. But this wasn't in the original quote, so I'd say about another $4,000. I feel bad if this entire job didn't feel like some crazy funhouse. Timothy just nods. Fine. Don't go crazy. Just so it's level and no one trips over it. Mike heads out to get the materials we need, and I drag one of the sandblasters over. The gash is smooth, and it'll need to be rougher if that quick set is going to fill it in right. Everyone gets to work while I start to blast into the thing. Then something black shoots right up out of the gash and clatters somewhere behind me. This is where I wear a hard hat, folks. I cut the blaster, I look around, and it doesn't seem anyone else heard anything. I look to what popped out the gash and realise the gash is about 9 inches deeper, and I can see it's still solid marble, no subfloor or dirt. Nothing is behind me but my closed toolbox. Whatever popped up must have shattered when it hit the ground, or all I saw was sand and blood popping out of the gash in the floor. I get my ear protection back on and finish up prepping the gash to be filled. We pack up for the day. The floor is pre-treated. We store the tools and such inside, and I do a quick head count, and I notice I'm short of 1 Honduran. Oh yeah, mystery solved on that one. Chavez is from Honduras. I look around and then spot him coming out from behind the barrier. Timothy walking behind him, his hand on his shoulder. Shit. I run over. Chavez, what the hell? You were told not to. Sorry, boss. Won't happen again. He's very quiet and looks to Timothy. Please consider. I do not mind. It's dangerous, Jorge, Timothy says. Discuss with me later, okay? Chavez just nods and walks off. What was that about? I ask. Timothy just walks past me. I thought you didn't ask questions. Not when it involves one of my guys. I clear my throat. Oh, I'm sorry, disobeyed your instructions. Timothy glanced back at me, and with the light from the door behind him, I kind of got the best look at his ice blue eyes. Ensure it doesn't happen again, please, Fred. I just nod dumbly as the red flags kept waving in my head. Just don't show up tomorrow. Take the money, leave the gear, go on your merry way. Granted, I'd only been paid half the job, but still, it was a decent amount. We get packed up, and the crew and I head out, packing my toolbox and other smaller items in the truck. I notice Timothy is locking up the doors of the place, and then escorts us to the gates. He closes them on the other side. I pull my truck up to the gate. You're living on site? Timothy hesitates for a moment, but answers, yes, I have a trailer out back. Oh, I'll see you bright and early in the morning then. Timothy just nods and waves me off. I never actually paid attention to where he went from there. I turn to Chavez in the truck and ask, so what did you and Timothy talk about? Care? Is all I get from Chavez. He's got to be fucking kidding me. Oh, put it out of my mind. I drop Chavez off at his place. He waves as always. Gracias, Senor Fred. And heads home. I head back home as well. At home, the kids are asleep, as is the wife. And I've got my toolbox in the garage. I'll pop open my toolbox as I've got to swap a few things in and out for the next day, specifically some mixing bits and the like. When I open my toolbox, however, something inside of it is certainly not a tool I've ever used. I suddenly recognise it. It's the object that came out of the gash. My toolbox was open behind me. It must have closed when the thing slammed into it. The object is about 3 feet wide in the centre, 2 feet long and about 3 inches thick at the top, tapering to a point at the bottom. It looks almost like a wedge, and I realise it's probably blood that seeped into this gash and solidified over the years. I pick it up, and it's light, but despite my attempts, I can't break this thing. Looking at this object in the light for the first time, it almost looks like a blade. Either that or the shape of the gash just shaped this thing into one. The top's flat, the bottom comes to a point. It's not sharp, but it could be. Light seems to penetrate through the edge of this thing, and it's tinted deep red. The rest appears to be black. I didn't even know blood could become a solid, but I guess if there's enough of it, it's possible. It's about after 10 after 11, and I swear I hear 3 taps against my front door, as if I had a knocker or something. And I don't, by the way. I leave the object in my toolbox, closing it and locking it, and head to the front door. I'm not an idiot. I make sure to check my closet next to the door, and I make sure my shotgun is loaded. It's after 11 p.m. What psycho comes knocking at someone's door this time of night? I open the door halfway, and I'm greeted by an outstretched hand with a black ring on each finger, one of which was about to tap again on the door. The hand pulls back and clasps a white-brimmed white hat, removing it from his head and lowering it to about chest level. One hand is behind him, and he's standing a good 6'3", wearing a white duster of some sort and a red tie over a black, very expensive-looking dress shirt. He has white-rimmed glasses and yellowish eyes behind them, jet black hair that's well kept. As he speaks, it's almost like his voice doesn't match his body. His face isn't odd, but it doesn't stand out, and his voice sounds almost like it comes from an old cop movie. Evening, young man. I understand you're working with an associate of mine. Goes by Timothy? While client confidentiality isn't on my cornerstone, keeping my business out of my personal life sure as shit is. Sorry, buddy, but I'm going to have to ask you to talk to me during business hours. His face falls slightly. Now, this is important. Regarding that place you're working in, Timothy may have misled you, you see. He's using this place for his own means, not prosperity. He pulls out some kind of business card and twirls it over each of his fingers before handing it to me. I look it over. It just has a phone number on it. No other information. His other hand brings up an unlit cigarette to his mouth. Inhales, smoke venting out of his nostrils. If you happen to come across something of note, I'd be appreciative if you could contact me. I'm not doing that. I'm not the kind to take things from a work site. Normally this is completely true. A shit-eating grin spreads across this guy's face, and his oddly perfect teeth almost glisten in the light on my porch. True. Be ashamed to take something that you don't understand, only to wind up dead. He cocks an eyebrow at me. Or worse. I had it with a creep on my porch at this point. Listen, pal, hit the bricks, you hear me? Get the fuck off my property. I'll call the cops. I try cocking a shit-eating grin myself. Or worse. I don't think it works, though. He stands still. I can barely tell if he's breathing. I pump the shotgun behind the door. I know there's no point to this. I just eject a perfectly good shell. But I want him to hear that I've got a gun. It's pump action, and it's in my hand. His voice suddenly changes, or he just drops the facade, and a raspy voice like that of a lifelong chain smoker slithers out of his throat, half whisper, half wheeze. Not parting with it then, eh? Well, I'll have it one way or another, for certain. The accent is hard to place. It's not quite Middle Eastern, but it's not like anything I've ever heard. And I pull the shotgun out and point it at his face. And now I'm done with you. Whoever the fuck you are, get out. He doesn't even flinch. He just grins more. A hissing chuckle dripping out of his mouth. You're a fun one. Never once does your sort disappoint. Always resorting to the fire provided by Prometheus. Yet, he pauses, eyeing the barrel of the gun, never considering where it came from. I'm not sure where he pulled it from, but he suddenly crunches into an apple he must have had in his pocket. I suppose I'll have to reconsider. Maybe when you're asleep. Like what happened to that hooker you cleaned up a few years back on Broadway. My heart skipped a beat. I don't talk about clients, and clients would never talk about me. And I never go into that much detail either. I just restore shit. A man of your skills is bound to clean up a homicide or two, knowingly or not. He tilts his head back, looking at me down the barrel of the gun. Cleaning up the sin left behind by those less scrupulous than yourself. Oh, we've been watching you for some time. And now, for some reason, his eyes go wider. Red, Fred. I click the safety off the shotgun and pull my finger on the trigger. Get the fuck out of here right now. Another loud crunch of his apple, and he seems to mockingly throw his hands up, walking backward, keeping eye contact with me with those yellow eyes. Very well. Another time then. You are a fun one, Red. He turns and starts to walk off. I haven't moved the gun yet. It's still trained on him. Don't fucking call me Red, you. I realised I hadn't gotten this creep's name. The card that he gave me only had a phone number. Whatever your God-given name is. My mother always said that when she was mad, she'd shout into phones all the time when telemarketers would give her fake names and shit. What's your God-given name? So it's a force of habit I picked up. I only said it when I was really pissed at someone, and this guy had me pretty livid. Bar none, the dumbest thing I apparently did all day. He stops dead on my walkway, and his hands slowly go up to his sides. Ooh. His voice whispers out as if he just won a prize. You compel my God-given name? His head starts to turn towards his right shoulder, but his shoulders aren't moving, not an inch. As I watch, I get ready to shoot. I swear if his head does a full 180-degree turn, I don't care what his name was. I'll just start shooting until he stops moving and probably pump a few more rounds into just to be sure. His head stops just shy of being completely turned. I can see both of his yellow eyes as he slowly places his hat back on his head. He grins, and I swear I watch his pupils dilate until his eyes look almost entirely black, with yellowish rings around them. You can tell Timothy my name too. He lets out another hissing laugh, and I swear I can hear the gun shaking in my hands for some reason. It's Belial. I don't know why, but I feel the blood drain out my face for a moment, and the whole area got a bit dimmer, as if something was draining it of light. I stagger slightly, but regain my footing, press the shotgun butt against my shoulder tightly, as if somehow it's going to help me. He turns away from me, and as he walks off, he wheezes out, "Don't forget to tell Timothy I stopped by." Another puff of smoke clouds around his head. And what I stopped by for. I pulled the gun back, shut the door, locked it, and shut the blinds. My heart was hammering in my chest as I checked the shells in my gun to ensure I had it loaded. I click the safety back on, and I rush upstairs to my bedroom. My wife is fast asleep as I sit on the edge of the bed, gun in hand, staring at my front door down the stairs. I swear I can hear something tapping 3 taps against my window at random times through the night. And that, my friends, is the end of episode 2. So Belial has popped up again, a bit like a bad penny. He's never very far away, is he? So we're going to have to see what happens. Fred's obviously got a bit of what we now know to be the sanguine amber. That's what's popped out of the gash in the marble. Now, he obviously doesn't know what it is. Obviously, we haven't had experience of the sanguine amber. We know what it is and what it can do. And that's why Belial's at the door. Belial wants that sanguine amber. And I think we're heading for some trouble. So it only gets more exciting from here on in. You will just have to wait till next week. Anyway, my friends, I want to thank you very, very much for being here. Thank you very much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed your stories tonight. I know that I did. Please let me know in the comments what you thought of them. I want to wish you all the best weekend that you can possibly have. And I want to say that I love you. And I will see you all again very, very soon. Please take care of yourselves. Big hugs and much love to you all. Bye-bye for now. Bye-bye. Oh, and I almost forgot. I forgot to wish you a good night. How dare I? Good night.